Hi, everyone. This is Danielle Nierenberg, president of Food Tank. I want to welcome you to Food Tank's weekly webinar series. Over the last several months, we've had an amazing group of speakers, including food waste expert Jonathan Bloom, urban forager Ava Chin, sustainable seafood expert Michael Tustley, scientist Chuck Benbrook, and agronomist Jerry Glover, among others. And today's webinar, I'm really excited about, and I'm pleased to introduce to you Dr. Lisa Kitinoja, the founder of the PostHarvest Education Foundation. And before I say a little bit about what Lisa is going to talk about today, I just want to let everyone on this call know that she has been a leader in the food loss movement for more than 3 decades, and she's someone I've greatly admired, and it's really an honor to have her participate and share her expertise with us all. Lisa's an expert on post-harvest losses and will highlight the causes of these losses occurring between farm and market and the solutions for cost-effective innovations and technologies to reduce food loss. And again, I'm really honored to have her with us. Today's webinar will be recorded and available on our website, and you can also follow and tweet at hashtag #FoodTankLive. So Lisa, without further ado, again, it's such an honor and a pleasure to have you participate. I'm just going to give you the floor now, and we really look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay, thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you for the opportunity to work with Food Tank and to introduce myself and some of the work that we've been doing at the Post-Harvest Education Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization, a public charity, so almost everything we do is free to the public and open to everyone. So this is a great opportunity to just share some resources and help people learn more about reducing food losses. The topic today is going to cover food losses from farm to market. I'm having trouble changing slides, Sarah. Okay, thanks. We have about, well, less than an hour to talk about a topic that could be weeks or months of educational information. So I'm just going to do an overview of some of the problems of food losses, and then talk a little bit about appropriate scale technologies that will reduce post-harvest losses, the causes and sources of losses, and then give you some examples of technical information that's on the web now that's free for you to download. And then just a very brief introduction to how you would determine whether that technical information fit your situation, and that's basically by determining costs and benefits. And then I'll end up with giving you some ideas and some resources for the future, things that you could learn about on yourself and networks that you can join. So you might have noticed that in the last few years there's been a barrage of information about global food losses and waste. And it's coming from lots of sources. It's coming from the UN, the World Bank, World Resources Institute, all kinds of think tanks and technical groups. There's a new Institute for Prevention of Post-Harvest Losses at the University of Illinois, sponsored by ADM. There's a Save Food partnership developing. And it's really great to see all of these things. And you might have seen some of these illustrations that try to capture just what we know about global food losses and waste. Um, for the purposes of this webinar, in the first illustration on this slide, there's a separation where we're talking about the yellow area. This is all food losses from farm to market. And then the red, the bars on the graph that are red, are what happens after the consumer purchases the food and brings it home or eats it in a restaurant or something like that. So we're not going to talk about the red area today, even though you can see that in North America and Europe, that's a very important waste issue. But we're going to talk just about the losses, the losses on the farm and all the way to the end market. So for those things, the post-harvest loss percentages are estimated for your food products anywhere from 15% of milk up to 42% of fruits and vegetables. And I mean, this is just an outrageous amount of loss that we have after spending so much money growing food and bringing food to market to just have it be lost during that process. A lot of our global resources are being wasted. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Mostly about perishable foods, fruits and vegetables, and post-harvest losses. So a lot of the publications that I've done and posted on the web and that we use for training talk about appropriate scale technologies. So I want to just introduce you to what that means, appropriate scale. Typically they're going to be smaller scale, so they're going to be useful to growers and traders and marketers that are working at a very low scale, small amounts of produce on a daily basis. They tend to be lower in cost, but not always. They can be more expensive technologies, but as long as they're cost effective for the smallholder, then we consider them appropriate scale. A lot of times they're very simple things that are easy to try on a trial basis using a comparison on your own farm or operation so that you can see for yourself if it's going to work for you. And often they are things that you don't have to purchase. You can actually make them for yourself. You can construct it for yourself. You can buy pieces and parts and put it together and not have to spend an extraordinary amount of money to do it. So before you decide what technologies might be useful for your own operation, or if you're a teacher or an extension worker, what kinds of things should you be teaching about? You have to look into the systems that are being used by the farmers, the traders, the food processors, and marketers in your own community, and you have to look to find out what the causes and sources of losses are. And this is typically it's crop specific. So you can follow one crop from the farm to the market, and you might do that physically. You might actually go and look yourself, or you can do it with questions. You can talk to people who work with that crop or call people on the telephone and ask them. But you're going to find out in a lot of cases that the major problems have to do with very rough handling, so throwing things around, very poor quality packages, so packages that are not sturdy, uh, sacks or baskets or plastic bags. A major problem is when we have the wrong temperature for that crop. So many crops need cool temperatures to extend their post-harvest life, and you'll see them just left out in the sun. And then if they're left outdoors, you'll see problems with water loss and just being exposed to rain and all kinds of pests. And then the final issue is always just how long does it take to get the food from the farm to the market, and any delays will typically lead to more losses. So if you're interested in these appropriate scale post-harvest technologies as a teacher or as someone who's going to share information, you can find some training materials on our Post-Harvest Education Foundation website. And they're all on there free to download. You'll find all kinds of things, but one is a manual that was produced many years ago with I worked with Dr. Adel Kader at UC Davis, and we produced a post-harvest manual. There's an energy use guidebook that came out a few years ago. There's lots of cost-benefit examples, and there's white papers on specific technologies, along with video links. So you just check out that page sometime in the future, and you'll find lots of examples. The one that I want to highlight is the Small-Scale Post-Harvest Handling Practices Manual, and this is published by UC Davis. You can purchase it as a printed copy for about $25 or $30, but you can get a digital version online on the UC Davis website without any charge at all. So it covers the basic things that have to do with handling foods and perishable foods. So very specific technologies that we recommend that will reduce losses in all of these categories, from harvest all the way up to processing. So before we even start thinking about post-harvest handling and processing and marketing, we have to think about how we're going to transport that food from the farm. This clipping from an international newspaper came out many years ago, but it's one of my very favorites because it's showing the Russian army being called into action because there was a problem with getting cabbage from a farm where they were harvesting to the market in the village. And it had been a problem with road damage and weather problems and all kinds of things. But the solution that the Soviets came up with was sending the army to the farm, and they actually each carried the cabbage to market. This is not exactly the way that you should be practicing your post-harvest transport. So thinking ahead is a really good idea. Thinking ahead means knowing that you're growing something that people want to buy, that whatever you're growing, the quality will meet the standard of the people who want to buy, that you're growing things that you'll make a profit on. You have to have an idea of the prices that you'll get, and then making arrangements for transport, talking to your potential buyers. All of these things help you decide what it is that you're going to be growing and selling. Once you've got the product ready to be harvested, there's some serious issues that you have to deal with on the farm. You have to know when to harvest. So, I mean, you might think this is a very simple thing, but the maturity of the crop, if it's something that's ripening like tomatoes or any of the fruit crops, it means that the time you have to market will depend on the maturity. So if you're harvesting red ripe tomatoes, like is very common in Africa, you only have a few days to get that product to the consumer so they can eat it. If you back off just a little bit and harvest the pink tomato or the turning tomato, you'll have more time to be able to market. You also have to know how to treat that crop gently and what's the best way to handle it. There are some crops that you can use picking bags for so that you can reduce losses. You don't have to make those big piles and throw crops around or use baskets that can damage the crop. But you can use a smooth picking bag that's clean, easy to clean, and you'll protect the crop. If possible, you want to use shade on the farm to prevent the heat of the sun from damaging the produce. You'll also have a chance to reduce losses if you think about the packages and containers that you use to handle the crops. So starting at the farm, we recommend plastic buckets or plastic crates that are nice and smooth on the inside and don't cause damage. We're also recommending things like stackable packages so that instead of having sacks stacked on top of each other or baskets with open tops, you have a package that has a stackable, firm surface so that the produce inside is not taking the weight. There's lots of ways that you can improve packages that you don't have to invest a huge amount of money in packages. If you already have a carton and it's not strong enough, you can add some dividers or add some corners so that it will be much more sturdy and it will protect the produce better. Once you have the produce harvested, you're going to be thinking about how do I keep this fresh? Maybe I have to wait for the transport to show up, or maybe the market is tomorrow, but I harvested it today. So how am I going to keep this produce cool? So one of the things that I like to remind people is that if you can just reduce the temperature of perishable foods by about 10 degrees C, you can double the amount of time you have for them to stay fresh and being high quality for marketing. So 10 degrees C change can be something like shade, using cold water if you have a deep well, making some ice and putting it near the produce. You can use things like evaporative cooling. In this photo, in the first photo down in the corner, that's showing a black mesh wall. This is charcoal that's being kept moist and letting air pass through to keep the room cool where produce is being stored. On the other side of the page where the bricks chamber is being shown, this is called a zero energy cool chamber, and it uses water, the evaporation of water, to provide a cool environment in the center of this chamber. Very low cost, and you can use it anywhere where the weather is dry enough to allow evaporation. And then the last photo on this page is showing a CoolBot. That's something you can research on the internet at a website called storeitcold.com. And you can make yourself a cold room at very low cost by just insulating the room and then installing a regular window-style air conditioner with a CoolBot controller. That will allow you to reduce the temperature of that room down to as low as 0 C. So you don't have to think about expending thousands and thousands of dollars for expensive cold storage rooms. You can make one for yourself. So you might wonder, well, how much do these things cost and what kind of power requirements do they need, and how do I know what to do? So a few years ago, I helped Winrock International produce this guidebook that's called Energy Options for Horticulture. So you can get this book for free on the web, and you can read about some of the things that are recommended for reducing food losses. And you can compare the costs that you for different kinds of power, for different sizes, all kinds of things are provided as examples. And you can decide for yourself if something is going to be cost effective. So finally, once you've got your food harvested and purchased and transported and whatever, maybe you don't have a market immediately for it, or maybe you're thinking that you want to process the food and sell it at a time when there's a low amount of that food available on the market. So the final topic that we talk about when we talk about reducing post-harvest losses is using small-scale processing methods and appropriate packaging in order to have that food last a longer time. So this includes things like drying perishable foods, fruits and vegetables. You can make all kinds of solar dryers. Some of them are very inexpensive, and there's lots of plans available on the internet that you can use. You can heat process fruits and vegetables and make jams and juices, all kinds of products that can be bottled or jarred. And then you can do pickling or fermenting. You can make sauces. One of the projects I worked on a few years ago was in Uganda, and the women were selling tomatoes at the peak of tomato season at their village and getting almost nothing for the tomatoes. But then a few months later, they were purchasing tomato chili sauces and ketchup type sauces that were uh, imported to the community because there were no fresh tomatoes available. So the project worked with them to keep their own tomatoes when they had very low value, process them into these sauces and ketchups and tomato products, and then keep those for their families and sell those in their villages as locally made products rather than having to purchase expensive outside products. This illustration shows one of the solar dryers that is being demonstrated in Tanzania, and it's a very simple setup with direct dryer. It's got 6 trays inside, and you can dry any number of different fruits or vegetables. Once the produce is dried, one of the failures in many of the programs that have been launched over the last many decades is that they need to be properly packaged. So we want to exclude air. If possible, we want to exclude light. So like the plastic buckets shown in this illustration are a good example of that. We want to protect the dried product from moisture, from insects. So there's all kinds of possible packages. Again, that has to be something that you determine is cost effective for the community and is going to be useful for maintaining the quality. So how do you determine whether something is going to be cost effective? That one of the projects I worked on about 5 years ago uh, provided a lot of examples. We were able to collect information from field trials that were conducted in India and Africa on 21 different situations of produce and technology. And what we did was use a really simple cost comparison where instead of trying to collect every single piece of information that went into the production and handling and marketing of that product, all we did was compare the differences between the current practice and some new practice that was being recommended. So we would not look at every single step, but we would only look at things that were different between the two. We looked at the cost, the relative cost, and then expected benefits. So expected benefits could be things like reducing the amount of losses, which would increase the amount you had available for sale. If quality changed, there could be a change in the value of the crop per kilogram. And then we would look at those things and see, was the new practice going to have a benefit compared to what was currently being done? So you can read these things. You can get this report as a free download from the Post-Harvest Education Foundation website. I'll just give you one example from that kind of a study. And since that study, in our e-learning programs that we do for the foundation, every one of our trainees does their own cost-benefit analyses for different crops in their own communities. So now we have hundreds of these available over about 30 different countries. So in this case, I chose this one because at first it seems like the investment, which would be spending $480 for plastic crates, is very expensive, and a small farmer could never actually do this. But what you find out is that if you use the plastic crates as compared to the sacks that are being used currently, and you use them for a product that has a reasonably high value. In this case, the sweet peppers were selling for about $1 per kg in Ghana. You could reduce losses so much and improve the quality so much that using these crates for 1,000 kilos of produce was immediately profitable. So you were actually making money on the very first use. So imagine if you were a member of a farmers association and there were, 40 or 50 members. That means you all only have to come up with about $10 in order to invest in this technology of improved packages and containers. And you could, as a group, every single time you took a load of peppers to the market, you could earn, after that first load paying back the cost of the crates, you could earn about $500 more than you do now. And you can use those crates 100 times or even more. So this example, even though it sounds like it's amazing, this is not unusual. And depending on the crop and what its value is, and depending on how much of it you have to market, there are many times when you can earn more money by making an investment like this. So for the purposes of this webinar, I just wanted to give you a couple of take-home messages. The first is that really simple changes in food handling will give you excellent results. So just being able to teach people that their perishables are delicate and alive, and they have to be treated gently. You don't sit on them, you don't step on them, you don't throw them. This can be a huge effect on reducing losses. Convincing them that using a protective container is really going to make a big payoff. A lot of times I've worked in places where sacks or baskets are used, and I've been told, oh no, it's just impossible, we can't change from that, it's too expensive. Having examples of the costs of these things and what you get back, how much more you get back by protecting the crops from damage, is immediately catches the attention of the people who are involved in uh, handling produce. And you don't always have to purchase new containers. You could actually do something like put a liner in a wooden crate. That will also reduce the damage that would happen if the inside of the container was rough. You could use uh, containers that are going to just be more easily stacked on one another, and you could stop overfilling containers so that they're not being squashed when they're stacked on top of each other. So those first two, really important: gentle handling, using protective container. The third one is doing whatever you can to keep the produce cool. One of the very first questions that comes to me when I travel around and teach workshops on reducing post-harvest losses is, well, what can we do instead of cooling? Um, well, you can do some things, but if you don't try at least to reduce that temperature, then everything you do will be very minimally successful. So even if you're using gentle handling, if you're doing it out in the middle of the sun and your produce is sitting there gaining heat, you're still going to have a very short shelf life. But if you do it under a shade cover, you have a lot more time to do it properly. And you can actually earn more money if you keep the produce cool. So those three things, I can't say them often enough. Be more gentle, use a better quality package, container, and keep the produce cool. These things, all of these things, and any other technology or tool or practice have to be supported. If you're the teacher and if you're running an organization that's training farmers, or you're the leader of a farmer organization, in order to convince your members or your trainees or your clients, they have to understand that costs and benefit comparison in order to be able to make an informed decision and decide if they want to use that practice. So this is as simple as it is, and it will make a huge difference. So for those of you who would like to learn more about the whole topic area of reducing food losses, you can visit our website. You'll find the training materials I talked about. You'll find opportunities to communicate with resource people and get some mentoring. If these are things that you think you want to try, we can answer your questions. We can help you make decisions and develop training materials. We have a group on LinkedIn that's called PostHarvest Training, and we have more than 2,000 members from, I'm trying to think, I think 140 countries we're up to. They're people who are from the most elders in the field of post-harvest handling and technology to the newcomers, young students who are just starting to learn. So the LinkedIn discussion groups can be a very interesting way to have all those people interact with one another. It's a place you can ask a question, get responses from all over the world. For those of you who are more serious and want to think about post-harvest technology as a career, we have e-learning programs that begin January of every year, and we generally take 20 to 30 young professionals into each program and go through a whole year of studies where you have 10 assignments. You go do your own loss assessment to find out what the causes and sources of losses are for a crop in your community. You learn about the most appropriate handling practices and technologies that will help reduce losses in that crop. And then we go through exercises where we design demos, we do cost-benefit analyses, and then we design training programs. So this is a really intensive year-long program that's very low cost. And if you get through the whole program and complete all the work, you get a post-harvest toolkit that has some of the things that post-harvest specialists use in order to assess quality and measure losses in the field. So you get a refractometer, a digital temperature probe, all kinds of color charts and rating charts to look at quality, scale, just a really interesting mix of tools that you can take with you and do your work. For people with less time to study, we have short courses that take only 1 week. And then the first one we did was in Bali, Indonesia this year, and next year we have one in Tanzania in February. We'll have at least 1 or 2 of these short courses every year, so you can just keep an eye out for something coming to your region of the world and look into that to participate. And then as we publish new studies and learn more about the technologies, we are publishing white papers that are available to download from our website. And we also do customized workshops, so people who are working for a larger organization that want specific customized training can talk to us about that kind of opportunity. So I just encourage you to look for some of these networking links and learn more on your own. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that I've been able to give you some leads if you're interested in learning more. And we'll spend the remainder of the webinar answering questions.
Thanks, Lisa. That was amazing. What an informative talk, and I thought your PowerPoint was excellent. We have a bunch of questions, so I think for the next 15 minutes, let's try to get through as many as possible. The first one comes from a Post-Harvest Education Foundation trainee, and she quotes you. Her quote, the quote she is using is that you say there are many processing methods that can be used by small-scale handlers, including drying, fermenting, canning, freezing, preserving, and juicing. And her question is, based on the above statement, I would like to find out if there are other new innovations in addition to the processing methods suitable for small-scale farmers. Are there recent articles that she can refer to that elaborate further on these methods, especially freezing?
Especially, what was the last word?
Freezing methods.
Oh, freezing. Oh, yes. Okay, well, there's lots of training materials available on these methods. And one of the best online resources for freezing would be the USDA. They have a home-based canning and freezing program. And then a second place is the UC Davis has a fantastic website with all kinds of resources on food processing and freezing. And Diane Barrett, who's on the PEF Board of Directors, she runs a wonderful processing training programs, and her website is just filled with all kinds of resources on canning and freezing. So I can post links to those two on the PEF website, and I'll just make a note that I'll do that today. You'll find those under training materials.
Great. That's very helpful, and we'll tweet those out and put them on social media as well, so people can find them easily. The next question comes from India, and the question is how can we minimize potato losses in cold storage in India, and can you suggest particular harvesting times to save potatoes? This person has also recently found out about solar panels that could supply thermal energy to the cold room, and they would like to find out how many watts are required for a cold room that's about 40 square meters, and how many solar panels are required. That's a very specific question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on using solar panels for generating energy to cool the cool rooms, and some of your suggestions for helping farmers store potatoes better, especially in tropical environments like India.
Okay, great. I've visited a lot of the potato storage structures in India, and it's quite the experience. Often they are huge places they were mostly developed in the 1970s and 80s, and they can be just enormous buildings where the potatoes are stored in sacks. Uh, I think that in general, uh, there's a lot of small changes that could be made for improving the potato storages in India, and there are organizations working on this. So there's the National Cold Chain Development Board, there's APIDA, there's all kinds of research going on. But in general, it's making sure that the temperature is correct for the potatoes, which often is not correct. It's either too cold or too warm. Reorganizing the internal part of the storage so that there were smaller rooms and more of them so that they were easier to manage, and that you could have better control of airflow and knowing when things went in and out. And then also just a sanitation issue, where keeping the storage clean and making sure it's completely pest-free and fumigated before you start the new season of putting in potato. Um, the solar panel question is a really good one, and I've seen some of these new ideas for solar cold rooms, and I've asked the people who are designing them. I've asked them exactly, how much would it cost, how many panels do I need, all of these things, and I think that in general they're still working on it, because there aren't any really good answers. But to determine for yourself in your own local place how much you would need, you can start by looking at that energy use guidebook, because there are some calculations of just how much heat is being released by produce uh, if it's kept at different temperatures, and if it's in certain size rooms, and whatever. There's so many variables that you basically have to do the math. So you need to consider a few really important things. If you want to minimize the number of solar panels you need and you want it to be as efficient as possible, you have to make sure that the cold room that you build is extremely well insulated. And this means you can look up something called R values of different construction materials. It's the resistance to the passage of heat, and you need an R value of about 30 or more in order to have a good high efficiency cold room. Typically, when I visit cold rooms in India and in other developing countries, the R value could be 5, it could be 2, it could be lower than that, because nobody's thinking about insulation. And so once they've built a cold room, and set it up to have a refrigeration system, they're using an enormous amount of power because the walls of that cold room are allowing heat to escape or heat to come in, and they're allowing heat to just create such an enormous load on that room that it can't keep up with the power requirement. So keeping that cold room efficient means thinking first about insulation. And then secondly, and this is also something I observed in India, uh, having a cold room in a place where it's out in the sun and you open and close the door many times a day in order to bring things in or out means that you're just giving up all your cold to the environment. So one of the things you can do is use really high quality doors that seal very well. Another thing is you can use plastic strip curtains that protect the opening of the door if someone's passing in or out. They just make a small opening instead of a big wide opening. And you find all of those things explained in the energy use guidebook. So I recommend that you download that and take a look.
Great, Lisa, thank you. I'm going to shift gears for a minute and ask you sort of a question around policy. How does the Post-Harvest Education Foundation work with policymakers? Is that something that's a focus for you? I mean, because a lot of the innovations and practices you've described seem so inexpensive. They seem so effective. And yet, as we've seen, you've been working on these issues a long time. It's hard to get, either nonprofits or research institutions or governments themselves to invest in them. So what would you tell policymakers and the funding and donor communities about why these methods are so effective, and why do you think that they haven't been investing in them as much as they should be?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think some of my colleagues would agree with me that it's been very frustrating over the years of our careers to feel like we're just shouting into the wilderness. I think it was Adel Kader and his colleagues working with the UN about 10 years ago that pointed out that only 5% of the money that's spent on agricultural development, research, and education is on post-harvest, and 95% of it is on increasing production. So the key thing for us has been, first of all, just getting policymakers to notice that. And so I've been working with the UN for a while, developing policy papers for various regions. And we just came out with one for the North Africa and the Near East, and that will be published next week after the big conference in Rome. But there are many other policy papers that have come out. They sound very repetitive. They sound like, okay, there's a problem. We know we have food losses. We know that so much money is spent on increasing production, but it keeps being wasted. Why don't we turn our attention to the other side and look at reducing waste and reducing losses and better post-harvest practices? And I think, Danielle, the policy issue is finally cresting, and the wave is breaking. So we're seeing some very loud and powerful voices start to think about this, and we're seeing more money go into the post-harvest research and development sector. We're seeing organizations like USAID put out RFPs that are specifically for post-harvest projects. This has never happened before. We're seeing the UN with their Save Food campaign, and I think more than 150 global partners now. This has never happened before, and so the policy issues are starting to come into the forefront, and it's really gratifying to see that happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the momentum is there, and hopefully the political will follow because I just think that, we're sort of at a tipping point in the food loss and food waste arena. Like now is the time to develop these strategies and implement them as much as possible in countries and regions all over the world. I'd also like to say that, it's been gratifying for Food Tank as well to see these changes sort of happening. And so much has been on the consumer side, but less has been done on really helping farmers, find ways to do their jobs better. So it's incredible the work that you're doing, and we're really grateful for it. I have another sort of specific question, and I think it's important to get to these. The listener asks, what types of crates do you suggest for carrying plantains in an open truck to reach market in around 7 hours? And this person is also from India and is interested in better and low cost storage for shallots. And I want to get these questions answered because I feel like these are so specific and so useful. And as you were talking about these crates, I was trying to imagine what they looked like. So could you tell us a little bit more about what some of these better handling crates look like and how they're used and, sort of the expense for farmers, how they can build them and that kind of thing?
Okay, great. That's a great question. Um, in general, you can find a lot of information on plastic crates in a white paper that we published last year. And we looked at returnable plastic crate systems. So in that paper, you can download from the website. You'll see photos of different types of crates. You'll see some of the costs associated with a whole system, because using a crate is only one part of the cycle. You have to get that crate back to the farmer. It has to be cleaned, it has to be taken care of, it has to be reverse transported, and so there are some costs associated with that as well. So these things are all very, very detailed. We did some 6 months worth of desk study and interviews of different companies that use plastic crates, and some got a lot of really interesting cost-benefit information on smaller scale uses. And so you can read about that in the white paper. To answer the question about plantains, really interesting question. I think that one of the things that you can do is just find some of the largest crates that are available. In Ghana, this last slide is showing a photo of a crate that's used in Ghana for tomatoes. And I mean, this is really a crazy amount of tomatoes to put in this size crate. Weighs almost 80 kilos by the time you're done. And the tomatoes on the bottom get completely smashed. But you could actually reuse that crate if you were talking about plantains and you had them in bunches and you just put 2 or 3 bunches into each crate. You actually could protect the plantains quite well using that crate because they're nice and sturdy and they won't squash during transport. That could be one option if you just want to use a recycled package. I would also put a liner in it because the inside of that crate is very rough. So just to reduce the scuffing damage on the outside of the peel of the plantains, I would make sure that if you were using a wooden crate, you had just a paper liner inside. A bigger investment would be plastic crates, and those would have to be fairly large unless you were going to either take the plantains off the bunch into hands or singles or something like that. Then you might be able to use plastic crates. The other thing, though, to consider when you're transporting on open trucks is you can do a few things to reduce the heat load on that truck. First, you can cover it just using a cloth or a polypropylene tarp. You can make sure that it's loosely covered on the top so air can pass. You can also arrange the crates inside the back of the truck in a way that will allow air to pass through the load during transport. So during those 4 hours, if you could possibly transport in the early morning or in the evening when it's cooler, you could actually be cooling the plantains while you were traveling. If you funnel some of that cool air, let it go through the load and outside the back of the truck. And you can find some illustrations of this idea that came from the 1970s work that was done by Bob Kazmaier at UC Davis when he was an extension agent there, or extension specialist there. We have illustrations in the SmallScale manual in the chapter on transport. So take a look at those and see if that sparks some imagination of what you can do with whatever vehicle that you have available.
Thanks, Lisa. We have time for one more question, and this is from your colleagues at UC Davis. And she's wondering, can you describe in a bit more detail the e-learning program that you've been offering over the past 5 years?
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. And the reason that we started doing an e-learning program was that what we found available for young professionals around the world in terms of what they could do to improve their skills in post-harvest was limited to long-term graduate education programs, and some of them either didn't have time or couldn't afford those kinds of studies, or to short courses where they had to travel to Europe or they had to travel to the US and spend, lots of money for like a 1 or 2 week experience. And so those are really wonderful opportunities for those that can do it, but there's hundreds of other people that will never be able to afford that. So what we did was we developed an e-learning program that was based on some of the early work that I did with USAID and with World Bank and with FAO on projects all throughout the Near East and Africa. And I had put together these training modules over the years. So we compiled it all into one, and we were able to come up with a program that is self-guided. So basically it's all there, or let me put it this way, it's mentor-guided, meaning we guide it, but it's self-paced. So anyone who enrolls in January, and the application comes out in November every year, they set for themselves whatever work schedule they want to use, as long as they participate and complete 10 assignments by the end of the year, the calendar year, then they complete the program. So it works really well for people who already have a job, or maybe they're a student enrolled in a grad program or something. But during that program, they get exposed to all the key things that are needed to become a post-harvest specialist. So a lot of our people who have been trained have become consultants. They use the information in their own work, if they already have a job at a company or a university or as an extension worker, or they are doing their own projects now where they're writing their own grant proposals and they're getting funding on their own to do work as post-harvest technical specialists. So what we've found is that these very specific key skills that are needed to be a post-harvest specialist are included in this e-learning program. So you learn to do loss assessments and find out really what's going on with the commodity in your own community. You look at everything from deciding what to plant, producing it, all the post-harvest handling steps, all the marketing steps, and then you come up with some priority areas where there's really some training needs or there's some research needs or something has to be done. And then you move on from that to learn about all the possible things you can do to reduce the losses that you found or improve the quality problems that you found for that crop in your community. So the e-learning program lets you really learn a huge amount about a specific crop, but also learn the process of how you would find out about losses for any crop. And then because there's an interaction going on between all the e-learners on our website, linkages on LinkedIn, on the blog, uh, there's a way for people to communicate with each other and learn from what each other is doing. And so we post feedback for each person and we give them ideas of how to improve whatever demonstration they designed or uh, things that they could look at for their crop that might be good technologies to check out in terms of local costs and benefits, and all of those things. Now, the whole idea is that if you're going to be a post-harvest training specialist, you want to teach people. So the final two assignments in the e-learning is you design for yourself your own program and what it would cost and how you would do it in your community. And then you also design for yourself a training center. If you could use your imagination and have as much money in your budget as you wanted, what would your training center look like? And so it's really fascinating to see what people come up with. We have over 100 now of these centers that have been developed on paper. And my biggest dream is that we start to see those centers set up in all these countries and lots more farmers get the opportunity to come and learn about reducing food losses.
Thank you, Lisa. Sadly, we are out of time for more questions, but they're still coming in. So over the next week or so, Sarah and I will put together a document for you so that you can see the rest of the questions. In the meantime, I suggest that all our listeners go to postharvest.org for more information. And again, we'll be posting the recording of this webinar on foodtank.com over the next few days so people can get more information there. Lisa, thank you again. You're such a heroine of mine, and I'm so grateful for the work that you do and for participating today. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Danielle, for this opportunity. I look forward to seeing the questions, and I promise to answer as many as I possibly can. So I'll either answer you as individuals or I'll post on our website.
Great, and thank you to all our listeners. Stay tuned for the November webinar. We'll be sending out the date soon for that. Thank you all again. Bye.